Hello. How's everyone
Hello,
doing?
doing well?
My name is Rachel Lighty, and this is FutureFeed training session number 2 for end users. So you probably met me in the first session, but I do 5 of them a week, so it's a lot. Um, let's see. All right, it's 2 minutes after, so we can get started. Let me share my screen. All right, you're able to see my screen. I'm showing FutureFeed.
Yep. Yes.
All right. So, like the first session, this session is being recorded. And once I end the call today, give it about an hour, then you'll get an email with a link to the recording. So, if you need to rewatch that, you can. I may have mentioned this in the first session, but I am actively working on some additional educational content like recorded videos that you can watch on your own. So when those come out, we'll release them and announce them in the application. So you'll get an announcement here in the announcement section of FutureFeed. And what else? What else? So this is being recorded. This is the second session. In the first session, we covered dashboards, the start area, people, tools, and documents. Before we jump into this assess area in FutureFeed, does anyone have any questions that they would like to start with? And it's okay if it's from the first session. Hmm? Okay. All right. So the assess page, and I am working on one monitor. Okay. So I don't see the chat. If you put something in there, I'll check it every once in a while. But feel free to just interrupt me as well. That's fine. I do like to engage as I do these training sessions. All right, so the assess page. This is where you will be documenting your compliance to the requirements. And so here for this training and all my trainings, I just stay in a level 2 environment. But if you were subscribed to other frameworks for your company, you could toggle between them. See, here's a level 1. Here's 853. Looks a little bit differently. Looks like that. Okay, so make sure you're in the right framework. And then this is where you're going to find all of the requirements in that framework and where you start identifying if they're implemented, meaning they're compliant or complete, or if they're not implemented, meaning there's still work to be done and you should put them on your system POAM to track them until that work is done. 2 views in the assess area. So you have this view, the normal. Okay. I'll quickly show we have an what we call a rapid gap assessment mode view. So to get there, couple different steps, but you'll select a family, any family. So I'm going to click on AC. And then up in this hamburger menu icon, the 3 lines there, click on that. And now you'll see this little rapid gap assessment mode, this running man icon. So click on whatever family you want to go to. So I'll stick with AC. And now all of my access control AC requirements are listed in one page. So here's 311 and 312, 3. So they're all listed. And it's only showing you this requirement satisfaction summary section. It's not showing you the interview section or the examine, test, all those other sections that you see in the other assess view. Okay. So you'd want to use this page to just do any basic or quick evaluations of your compliance, and you'll get a better idea of score, SSP, and POAM needs. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the regular view by just clicking on the assess. And now if I click on a control, we'll do 318. You can see here it's just one requirement per page. They're not all listed, just one of them. And we have these 6 sections. So we have that requirement satisfaction summary section. And Now we have an interview, examine, test, place to house additional artifacts, and some questions that you could ask yourself or someone in your company to evaluate compliance with this requirement. All right, so let's go over all these. Um, in this requirement satisfaction summary area, this is where you're defining how the requirement is implemented. You're going to define that in the summary notes area here. I would use this summary notes area to define the control as a whole that was designed and implemented to meet this requirement. And then we have this, if I scroll down at the objective level, we have these statements, objective statements sections. Now, this is also where you're defining how something is implemented and how you're how you're compliant to something. But you're speaking just to that one objective here. Okay. So in the summary notes, I would put the whole picture together and define what's that process as a whole look like that's meeting the requirement. And then in the statements, just speak to that one objective. How is that one objective being implemented? Okay. So in this requirement satisfaction summary, you're defining how you're compliant or what you've implemented to meet the requirements. We're tracking compliance at the objective level, as you can see. Okay. So, um, what was I trying to say? So at the objective level, you get to, identify status. So is this one objective met or not met? In FutureFeed, let me show you here if I mark this one met. Um, right now, look, there's no poem items open for this objective right now. There's just a plus sign there. That means there's no poem items. Now, in FutureFeed, if you mark something not met, it's going to create that first poem item for you. So now it says number 1 there. I just created a poem entry, an entry on my system plan of action. Um, which is called your FutureFeed up here. And we'll get to that in a second. So I will now make a point to open up this poem and tailor it to describe what was the failure, what was the issue, what was wrong, and what's the fix. So really in a poem description area, you should be just, defining a little bit, what was the issue, but most importantly, defining what's the remediation, what's the implementation plan, what's that fix. And so whenever you mark something not met in FutureFeed, it will create that first poem entry for you, and then you'd make it a point to open it up and tailor this description to fit your environment. It's going to come pre-populated as you see here with some narrative. And this is just meant to be helpful. So when you're writing your own poem description, maybe you could leverage bits and pieces of that. Um, but then when you make a poem, tailor the description, identify impact, effort, and cost, set a due date, and assign that poem to someone so they get notification and they can start working on that item. Um, okay. So you can also create more than one poem item for an objective. As you see here, I have 2 poem items open for this one objective. To do that, you just click on the poem icon, hit the add poem, um, and type in, I'll do it up here because then I can show you there could be 3. We'll make a third one here. Type in, what you want that poem to be about and hit save. And now I have 3 poem items open for that one objective, 4 total for this one requirement. Now, why would you create more than one poem? It's completely up to you guys. I think it also depends on the size of your company. But for example, um, let's say in my environment, I have a Linux server and I also have a virtual Windows server in the cloud somewhere. Um, and this one is a limit of unsuccessful logon attempts. And so maybe I'm not compliant across the board and I create one poem and it's specific to what needs to be done in my Linux system. So this here, this text, it would in Linux go to this setting, do this. Um, and then I would assign that poem to the Linux system administrator. And then maybe I'll create a second poem and I'll write up what needs to be done in the Windows system in our virtual machine in the cloud. And then I'll assign that to whoever is responsible for administering that system and applying that setting in that system. Okay. So it's up to you if you want to make more than one for objective. You can do depending on the size of your company and the different teams, or maybe you want to very clearly say what needs to happen. And so step one is a poem, step two is a poem, step three is a poem. You can break out your milestones and the steps into separate poems just for, tracking purposes. It's definitely user preference. Okay. Um, so if you mark something met, okay, I want to show you I just marked something met, and now it's prompting me and it's saying, hey, you're going to mark this objective as met, but just so you know, you have 3 open poem items for this objective. So do you need to mark those complete? Um, and if you want to, you can mark them complete right there, describe what was fixed or leave them open if you need to, whatever have you. Um, and so, but when you mark something met in FutureFeed, my recommendation would be to only mark things met if you have described them and you understand how they are met. So you need to describe how it's being met in your environment. And you're going to want evidence or artifacts. And so for this first one here, I said the means of limiting unsuccessful attempts is defined. My objective statement says that it's defined in the access control policy. So I'm going to want that latest and greatest, most current version of the access control policy. And I want to look in it to see if in there it defines the limit of unsuccessful logon attempts and calls out in the scope as being applicable to my system. Okay, so um, again, when you mark something met, try to have that description of how it's met in the summary notes and at the assessment objective level, and then try to have that evidence so you can house it in FutureFeed and get it connected to this requirement. You're building out that body of evidence you're going to need to perform any internal or external assessments down the road. When you mark things not met, mark them not met, revise the first poem that gets created, create another poem if you want, but make sure you're defining what the issue is and what needed to be corrected, what's the fix, the implementation, remediation plan, whatever you want to call it, and get it assigned to someone so that work can begin. Um, Inheritance, we track that you can track that at the objective level if you choose to use this function. So what this is, inheritance in the world of CMMC NIST 800-171 means that your company has hired an external person, an external entity to perform some services that meet NIST 800-171, or they're providing some systems that need to meet 800-171. Okay, that's inheritance. And so if you have anybody external, any external service providers doing something or providing something to your company that is storing, processing, or transmitting CUI data, then they're an external service provider and they will need to have a customer responsibility matrix and be involved when you get assessed because they're helping you meet some of these requirements listed here in this assess page. So let's pull up the sample here. For objective B, I said the defined means of limiting unsuccessful logon attempts is implemented. I just want to show you guys here, and I've seen this. I'm a lead CCA, so I do assessments. And a big mistake that I see often with system security plans is organizations fail to address how that requirement is being implemented for all asset types. Okay. What I mean is, I've gone to an assessment where I'm assessing someone and they've written their system security plan and they're only speaking about the Windows machines and what Active Directory is doing and everything in their office and their up in their cloud in their Windows environment. They failed to speak about the on-prem firewall that needed to implement these requirements, or the backups that they have stored in the warehouse on a Linux machine. They didn't address how those are being secured and meeting the requirements. Okay, so especially when it comes to the technical requirements and the technical objectives, just think about all your technical assets out there and ask yourself, how is this objective, how is this requirement being implemented on this asset? And so, for example, in this fake environment, I have an on-prem firewall, and I say that my firewall is configured to limit unsuccessful logon attempts by a local security configuration setting, which is set within the firewall console, and that um, I have an administrator who is responsible for managing the firewall. And then I go on to say I have a file server. Now, this file server is a Windows server, and it's picking up an Entra ID policy that's being pushed at the domain level that's implementing a failed login attempt. And um, go on, blah, blah, blah. So down here, I say Prevail. Here I have an application that I'm using in my environment to store, process, or transmit CUI data. This is a cloud-based application. And so the application and the systems need to meet NIST 800-171. And so the system's supporting that application. And so the provider of that application, the Prevail vendor, is responsible for configuring that application to the application and the infrastructure housing that application to meet these requirements. And so that's inheritance, right? So here I say this requirement is fully inherited by Prevail. Prevail and the vendor are solely responsible for implementing this requirement in the Prevail components, and C, the Prevail CRM. So I have some inheritance here. And so when I call out inheritance in my objective statement section, when I call out that someone else is doing something for me and please see their CRM, then it should match this inheritance icon here. So I would click on it, identify the inheritance status. I'm not going to say fully inherited, okay? Because it's only fully inherited for Prevail. But my environment has Prevail and Windows and Linux and a firewall and a bunch of other stuff. So overall, as a whole, it's partially inherited. I have some inheritance for some of my assets in scope. And I would click that and then click on this little icon and scroll down and select oh, it looks like I already did it. Select the provider uh, and the vendor and the tool that you want to associate as having inheritance. Okay, so that's all at this requirement satisfaction summary area. You also have place to watch a video if you'd like, some internal discussion. So here's where you can chat amongst your team and communicate with them, maybe, and anything you put in here in this discussion area, it's not going to show up in your system security plan. So maybe you just want to have, hey, Michael, give me this screenshot that shows me this. You'd want to have that conversation in this chat room so it doesn't show up in the SSP. Confidence rating. So this is more for our service providers, but you could also use it. So if you happen to be in charge of evaluating if security is implemented at your environment, and let's say you're interviewing someone at HR, you're a big company, you don't really know this person, but they work for the same company. And you got to, hey, does HR do security training for new employees? And if they say, "Oh yeah, we do. We have a we follow this process, and here's a document, and we do this training, we use this tool, and everything's documented, and here you go. I'll get it to you." My confidence in that response is high that what that person said is going to be accurate and in place. But if they were like, "Well, I'm not sure. I'd have to look. I thought I saw a document that we started a couple months ago, but maybe it didn't get approved," and then I have a low confidence that what they said was accurate and actually implemented. And so you can use that confidence rating just for your own use if you want. So that's the requirement satisfaction summary. Under that, then you have interview, examine, and test. Okay. These are assessment methods. All external assessors, when they come and assess your level of compliance for a CMMC assessment, they are taught and tested on using these three assessment methods. So we're going to interview. We want to talk to the people for, oops, sorry, I keep clicking the wrong button. For 318, we want to talk to the people responsible for doing what you say in these summary notes here and what you say in these statements here. We want to talk to the people responsible for implementing this requirement, making sure it gets implemented, all that stuff. And so that's what we're going to do in the interview. We're going to ask you about your processes and procedures to see if they are meeting the requirement and also to see if they are aligning with your documentation. And under interview is where you identify all the people using that RACI model again that have some level of involvement. Anybody you list here is going to be potentially interviewed during that external C3PAO assessment. But then also when you have to do your annual internal assessments, if you got this information filled out, just, let's say it's time to do the assessment, you got to pull up FutureFeed, you look at 318, you read how it's implemented, you look at the old artifacts that were provided, and then you're going to reach out to these people and say, "Hey, are you still doing this? Is this document still around? Did we create a new document? Did we change up the process?" So these are all of the people that you're going to speak to when you have to do those annual internal assessments to see if things are still compliant. All right, examine. So another assessment method is they will examine things. So they're going to examine your documents. They're going to want to examine your system configuration settings. They're going to want to see some screenshots. So they're going to examine stuff. And typically it's documents. And so under the examine is where we're housing all of your documents, your security documents that you logged and connected to this requirement in FutureFeed. If you're missing something, hit the plus, find it, log it. If there's things connected that shouldn't be connected, remove them, okay? Because you don't want to overwhelm an assessor with unnecessary evidence. If they're looking at the 318 control, they only want to see evidence for the 318. They only want to see evidence that what you set up above is true and it's happening. And so down below in the examine, just try to only have that evidence that supports that one requirement. Okay. It's going to make your process a lot smoother. And then for your annual internal assessments, it's a lot easier when you have your evidence identified because then when you have to do that assessment, you can look to see at, what evidence you collected previously or what evidence you have identified in FutureFeed, and then just go collect that new evidence. For example, if it's a screenshot of a configuration setting, but it's 2 years old, well, when I'm looking if I need to evaluate today if that configuration setting is still implemented, I'm not going to look at an old screenshot. I'm going to call the person who's been identified as responsible, and I'm going to say, "Hey, can you give me a new screenshot? Here's even the old screenshot if you need to know exactly where to look to get the screenshot," something like that. So, examine. That's all your documents. Test. So here's all the technology, the services, and the vendors that that are part of your environment that are either picking up the requirement or implementing the requirement. Okay. And so sometimes an assessor will perform a test where they actually try to execute the objective of the requirement to see if that response was expected, if that was the correct response, the expected response. It's hard to test all of the requirements, um, and it's not you just can't test all of them. And so we test where we can, but when we do a test, it's usually involving a system or some technology of sorts, and so that's why we listed under test all of the technology. So down here, you would connect just the things, um, just those assets that are implementing the requirement or being used to help you implement the requirement. And those are all of the potential things that then they can look at to test or examine. You have a place to house additional artifacts if you want, just here. So anything you upload here is going to be only ever found under this one requirement. And then, like I said, you have some questions here. These are questions that an assessor would ask, typical questions an assessor would ask. And so, if you are stuck with doing that internal evaluation for your company and you need some guidance on what to ask, who to talk to, what to look for, just follow these, um, if you'd like. You don't have to use them. Okay. Now, just know if I'm answering this question, is there a defined limit of login attempts? If I say yes, see what I'm writing? I'm defining why I say yes. So I'm defining the implementation. What did the company implement to meet this? So I'd be typing that up and defining why I said yes. If I said no when I type this up, just know I'm creating a system POAM. So why did I say no? What's missing? Does it need to go on my system POAM? Or there's the not applicable. Anything you not mark not applicable, try to always justify why you said it's not applicable so you can retain that analysis for future. Um, okay. Now, evidence like screenshots. So, for example, this objective B here, I want some screenshots. Let's say for my firewall, I want my administrator to log into my firewall console and just take a screenshot showing me that there is a configuration setting related to limit of unsuccessful logon attempts and that I've set it to 5 failed login attempts. Um, so I want a screenshot. And let's say I get that screenshot. Well, let's actually just say I want a screenshot. So here's how you would request a screenshot. You could request. You can do it. You can call them up. You could send them mail, whatever you want. But so I'm going to scroll down to test because remember that's where I'm going to find my technology. And again, I'm trying to get a screenshot of my firewall settings. So I'm going to locate my firewall. There it is. I'm going to open it up. And then under here, I'm going to click on a task and I'm going to say exactly what I want. So screenshot of yada, yada, yada. Limit of unsuccessful login attempts. Blah, blah, blah. Get it assigned to the system administrator or whoever I need to get that screenshot, due date, hit submit. So that's how I'm going to request the screenshot. Now that person, um, will get notification that they have a new task in FutureFeed. By the way, anybody you give a task to, um, I would recommend just giving them an account to your FutureFeed environment so that way they can actually log into FutureFeed, see the tasks, get notification of the tasks, and then when they complete the task, they can log all that activity in FutureFeed. So anyway, so Mina, she'll get a notification that I need this screenshot. She'll log into FutureFeed, click on the task, and she has the options to create a brand new document, link a document, or attach. So she would upload and attach that screenshot that I need. Um, that's obviously not audit, but just for example purposes, and then hit save and complete. Um, and sign off that they did it. Okay. So now, give it a minute. I'm still in my firewall ticket, my firewall inventory item. And I was under tasks, but now I'm under evidence. There's no open tasks. We completed the one that was in there. When you complete a task, it gets logged in the evidence section. So all my completed tasks will show up here. And now if I click on it, I can see the file that I uploaded. That wasn't the one, was it this one? So this data, here's the screenshot that I uploaded, which was not a screenshot, it was a fake diagram, but you get what I'm saying. So now if I close back out, let's pretend it's a brand new assessment. 1 year has passed. So I'm gonna log into FutureFeed, read the requirement, okay? Then I'm gonna read this summary notes to understand how that requirement's been met. Read the objective statements to get a better idea at the objective level, how it's implemented and the type of evidence I need to start looking for. Identify the people who I need to interview, and then if I scroll down and let's say I read here in my statements, okay, the firewall has this setting, scrolling down, there's my firewall. I'll click on it and I can find that setting over here, right there. So you don't need to upload it again. You know what I mean? So create tasks in the inventory items. Okay. Any questions with the assess page of FutureFeed? Here it is. Any questions with these 6 sections? Okay, so at this point in time, if you filled out FutureFeed and approached it the way I've been training our recommended approach, meaning you've logged your security personnel, security roles, and security teams. You've logged your assets, your technologies, and connected them to the controls. And you've logged your documents, connected them to the controls, and created POA&M items. Then you've done an assessment and you've developed the summary notes, the implementation narrative for the controls that are met, and made sure to clean up the interview, examine, and test areas, only having the people you want tagged and the documents and the systems you want tagged. Remember, only give the assessors exactly what is applicable to that one requirement. If you give them too much, they're going to start looking at everything and go off on tangents. So after you've done that, then the next step will be to do a review of your system security plan, because now your system security plan is going to be fairly filled out. You're going to have some technology, you're going to have some documents, you'll have some sort of status for the requirements, POA&Ms created for anything not met, some details and evidence for things that are met. And if you filled out the start area, you've defined the system and you've defined the company and the scope. Okay. So in your SSP, if you were to generate one now, it's going to be fairly populated. I mean, it just takes a while to populate FutureFeed, so you still be missing data, but eventually you'll get to a point where everything's done. And so now in the SSP area, this is a browser view of the system security plan. Okay, so you're going to want to review the sections of your SSP in this browser view, in this subway stop, just for ease of navigation and logging review history and approval. Um, so for example, one thing you could leverage is this compliance review section. And so maybe the system info page here, this one here, maybe I want to assign this to my CEO. Okay. And then over here, when it starts talking about the requirements and really gets into the nitty gritty of how the requirements are implemented and if they are, all that stuff, all that work we just did in the assess page, you might want to assign this to maybe your system security officer or the information um, system owner or someone with some knowledge on evaluating security requirements and knowledge on the requirements. And so um, here I assign Jeff. If I go back to scope, I have Carrie assigned. So these compliance review table, you can assign the different sections of FutureFeed, or I'm sorry, you can assign the different sections of your system security plan to the right people at your company who know that information because you want them to review it for accuracy. So then they can log that it's reviewed. And if it's reviewed and you want them to approve it, they can log that it's approved as well. Okay. And so here you're just going to navigate through the different sections of the SSP to review it. And if something's inaccurate, like let's say this is inaccurate, just click on the edit button. It will bring you back to that section of FutureFeed where that data is being captured here. Um, and then if I make that change, go back, now that's been updated. Okay, now I can mark it reviewed and approved because it's good to go. You also have these little reviewed flags down here. This is the older way of logging things reviewed. You could still use it. We left it there because some people like it, but you're just logging the different sections as reviewed or not reviewed, and it creates a history. So there, that one's not reviewed. If I go over here, I can mark this one reviewed or not reviewed. It's different for each section. Um, there are a few, go through this. The point is to review and edit and approve the SSP here in this easy to navigate way. And then you would go over to deliverables and run an SSP report. That's where you're actually going to generate a Word document of the SSP. Then you might want to get that turned into a PDF and get a digital signature on it. That's your call. But when I run this system security plan report, though, I can have a high level of confidence that what's in there is accurate because I just reviewed all the data that's going to be in there in this SSP area here. Okay. And so instead of reviewing 60, 100, 150 pages or more of a system security plan, you can do that review in here. It's laid out nicely and it logs that review and that approval activity. And there are in the system inventory section or system environment section, you'll see notifications. So here I got a number 3. It's telling me that I've missed something. Okay. So you do have to like look in here and see what it's asking. Look under my hardware. It looks like I forgot to upload my asset inventory list. And so I'll click on this and I'll need to attach that or upload it or link to it or maybe copy and paste over here, whatever I want to do to it. Um, so pay attention to the red markups and address those. All right. Now over here under your FutureFeed, this is your FutureFeed plan of action and milestone. This is the POAM. This is your system POAM. You need to have a system POAM per the requirements. So we're helping you meet that requirement if you use this area. Um, And so on your system poem, anything that you created, all those non-compliant objectives, all those documents that are in draft, all those tools that are not yet in production and are still in the acquisition process, everything, everywhere you made a system poem, it's now going to show up here under this first page, pending, in progress, and completed. These are all the different poem line items. In this environment, I have 38 poems open. And so the goal then would be we've implemented this project builder. This one is not a bad amount, but sometimes, you'll be working with 50, 100 or more different poem items, and that's a lot of different items to track and stay up to date on, because that's what you have to do for a system poem. If you actually, you log something on your system poem as meaning something needs to be fixed or corrected, and then you have to actually do that work and get it fixed and corrected and make sure that work is ongoing and nobody's forgotten about that item, right? You can't just put something on your poem and walk away and never look at it again anymore, I guess. So anyway, the with the project builder, the goal is to build projects. Okay, maybe you want to group all of the items together that are related to Linux operating system, and you put them all in one project and you assign it to the Linux admin because they're going to apply all those settings. Or maybe you have a tech writer at your company who's helping you write all your security documentation. And so you'll group all those security documentation non-compliant items and assign it to them. However you want to group it, by teams, by like non-compliance, up to you. What I like to do is if I log into the poem over here under the proposed projects, I'll filter by it. Okay, so these ones here that have a plus, they're not part of a project yet. So these are just one-off poem items. And my goal would be to try to put them in a project so I don't have a bunch of one-off items that I have to stay on top of. So let's see if one works out here. Do we got anyone for documents? Here, we have a procedure. It's not part of a project. It's an incident response recovery procedure. And right below that, we have a policy that needs to be made. So those are two security documents. I'll go up here and add to projects. Now I can add them to an existing project like I'm going to do now, or I could create a new one and just give it a title. So you kind of see here, like you can create them projects per document or per team or whatever you want to go with. So I'm going to add it, hit add to projects. And now if I go over to my project portfolio and I find my security document project, this is what a project looks like. Here's all the data you can capture for the different projects. Title, overall impact effort cost, start and due date, responsibility assignment, status, um, if there's any pricing or budgeting considerations with this project. Here's a place for you to upload documents, maybe a project plan or remediation, implementation plan. And then down here are the items, the individual poem items that are part of this project. So right now we just have the two in there. Okay, so you have a listing of all the poem items, and then you also have the ability to group poem items in different projects, um, to help you with managing that poem and all those issues. Then after your poem, the last page we got to cover is this deliverables. Okay, so now your whole future feed environment's pretty populated and you can start running some reports, exporting your SSP, maybe creating some presentations on compliance activity. I'll just show you real quick how the presentation slash report builder works. It's called this cyber readiness presentation or report builder. You'll go to setup, put your name, email, phone. Okay, executive summary. What is the report? Let's say that we're going to meet let's just continue my example of that project for security documentation. And now I'm going to put together a report to meet with my tech writer to show her the project and show her the new poem items that are part of that project and get her to do the work. So that's the purpose of my meeting. So I'll define it here. Meet with tech writer. Well, spelt writer, right? Writer. Okay. Yada, yada, yada. And then go to cyber readiness and just pick the content you want. So um, I'm going to turn everything off and then I'm going to build out my presentation. So I'm going to make it have a welcome. Why not? And then I want to just present that one project. So I'm going to go down to projects. Well, you know what? Maybe I'm also going to just give some basic poem anatomy metrics. And then I'm going to find that one project and present that. So where is it here? Security documentation. Okay. I can change the theme. We have military. We'll make it dogs for fun and hit play. And now I've created a presentation that's pulling the data from FutureFeed. So here's my presentation. Here's my welcome. Here's some poem metrics. Like I said, here's all my poem items. Maybe I have to present those. Here's some more metrics. Scrolling down, and then here's my one project for security documentation. Now, all of this is empty and to be determined in blank because I didn't fill it out, but you would fill out the project metadata and then it would be presented here. And then here's my two items that are part of that poem, um, or my two poem items that are part of that project. We got two pending, still open, and it looks like we completed some actions. Okay, now I'm gonna hit exit. Okay, so now it looks like that looks very much like a PowerPoint presentation. If you download the report, export it, looks more like a report. Um, but it's to help you make those compliance management reports or presentations. Since you're doing all that work and this is occasionally, I'm assuming you may have to present on that work, and this should help you build out those reports. So just play around with pretty much everything that gets captured in FutureFeed, you can report on it here. Just look at the table of contents. Um, tracks history. Poem. You can export your system poem if you want. You can export a listing of the poem actions or the poem items, and you can export a listing of the poem projects. Just hit export and it will make a Word version. I do want to point out, if I go back to your system poem, this view, you can also export here, and here you can export to Excel or CSV. Under the deliverables poem part, you can only export to Word. Here's where you're going to export a system security plan if you ever need to share that with someone outside of FutureFeed, or maybe route it through your management team for signature outside of FutureFeed. You would do that here. Just click the download button. If I want to mark a poem version as approved, I don't have enough. I'm not going to generate a report right now because it takes a minute, but let's say I did. I hit this button and I generated a report. It's going to show up down here in my revision history that I generated that SSP report. So let's pretend that this first one was it. Actually, let's pretend that, yeah, we'll just say that, I have to figure out what it is. Hold on. I'm trying to look for a report. See, this one says SSP Lighty. That's a cyber readiness report. There's an SSP. So let's pretend this was the SSP that I just generated and I reviewed it in this SSP area, and now I want to export it, maybe get a signature on it, or just log it as approved. I'm going to click on, I can first download it again if I want to. Then approve this report, mark it, approve who approved it, what date was approved. They would add their signature, right? If I was Bart, if I was approving it, I would be logged in. Bart would be logged in and be doing this. But they'll add their signature, maybe any version notes or changes to highlight. Are they submitting to Spurs? And should this SSP match and be submitted also with Spurs? And hit save. So that's how, at for right now, the level of SSP approval that we have in FutureFeed. Now you can show that it's approved. It was approved by this person on these dates. And if I go over onto my approval record is where I can download that digital signature down here, if you need to. Okay. Um, if you're not aware, whenever you have to submit your score into the Spurs system, they want to know your system security plan title, the version of your system security plan, your score, any POA&M dates. And so they collect this information with the expectation that your organization is going to have and retain and archive that version of the system security plan that aligns with that score that you just submitted. So if you ever get audited and maybe, contracting officer says, "Hey, on October of 2024, you said that your score was a positive 110. Can you please give me your system security plan that aligns with that score?" That, when you put your score in, they ask you for your SSP title and version. And so when you have to submit a score, use this function because it tells you all the data that you need to know when you submit it. And if you click snapshot now, it's going to create a little snapshot of your SSP and then it will save it down below. So if you ever need to get it back for auditing purposes, you can. Exports, any of the data you put into FutureFeed, any of the files, information, you can export it all here. And I would expect that at some point you would want to explore and use this function, especially when you're engaging with that C3PAO for an assessment. They're going to want you to give them your body of evidence. So they're going to want your SSP and all your other evidence. Well, at that point in time, hopefully you will have had time to build out FutureFeed and get all that evidence logged in FutureFeed and connect it to the requirements and all that stuff. So then you just have to export it here and then send it over to, export it, review it, and then send it over to the C3PO assessment team. Okay, 6 minutes. I'm gonna stop sharing just so I can open up the floor. Does anybody have any questions?
I was actually curious if it's possible to get access to like a read-only version of your training environment, because some of the info you have there it clears up so many questions that I have just seeing those examples.
Um, Unfortunately, I don't have the ability to do that. I'm sorry. But I would be happy to work with you if you need to. You could just reach out to me, rlighty@futurefeed.co. I could yeah, I could give you access.
You
Mm,
can give us access?
well, I'm trying to think out loud because it's not read
Okay.
only, but it's a training environment, so I guess I wouldn't be upset if you made any changes accidentally. It's just not. Let me think about it. Let me think how that works, and um then we could speak together after this and see if I can do that or not.
All right, appreciate it.
So, can you do me a favor and shoot me an email?
Mm-hmm.
rlighty@futurefeed.co.
RLEIDY.
Yeah. Yep. All right. Anybody else have
Okay.
any other questions? All right. Well, then I can go ahead and end this meeting a little bit early. Thanks for your time. Um, Reach out to me if you need some help. Attend the Thursday sessions, the weekly Thursday sessions if you need some help or just want to listen in to other use cases or issues people have with FutureFeed. We also talk about the CMMC, the requirements in CMC there as well. That's Thursday.
And you don't
Rachel,
mind
is that the,
if we join if we do the level 1 or level 2 trainings again, right?
Yeah, you can do as many as you need.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Rachel, the other Thursday thing, is that the sort of office hours thing you were referring to?
Yes. So
Okay.
to register for that, just log into FutureFeed and then scroll way to the bottom, and it's this 15 minutes with FutureFeed session here. It's a weekly session. It's really 30 minutes. It's a 30-minute session with me.
Got it.
I start the meeting and people who need help or have questions join.
Great. Thank you.
All right. Well, that's it. So thank you all for your time, and reach out to myself or support@futurefeed.co if you need any more guidance, and good luck.
Thank you much.
Sure,
You're welcome. Yeah. Bye.